Throughout the course of my life, I've been really obsessed with archiving things. I have an entire video called Being an Archive that kind of highlights these points, dissects them, and talks about them. But I think what's interesting about that video, to me at least, isn't just the concept of it itself. It isn't just the things that I said in it. It's also what I did right after I released the video. Because that video was kind of like a swan song for me. It was one of those things that I made while it was very late at night. I couldn't sleep. I was kind of sad, to be honest, and I was thinking about something. Something that had been a prevalent issue in my life at the time. Something that a lot of my friends didn't understand, and I felt disenfranchised by them as a result of them not understanding it. So that video was the culmination of months upon months of rigorous emotional and intellectual labor of me constantly thinking about why it is that I feel this way and am this way, because I felt a very real social pressure to defend myself. Now, the pressure wasn't that big looking back. I was dramatizing it more than I probably should have, but I didn't know at the time. That's the thing, is that I was making a lot of these videos based on arguments that I would have with friends. I would make, or rather, I would write out an entire script just to defend an argument that I had made on Discord because I was so obsessive about being understood. The thing is that anxiety is kind of just in the background for me now. Like, I don't really care nearly as much as I used to about being understood, and I don't really take people's opinions nearly as seriously as I did when I made those videos. But regardless, when I released that, it was kind of like all of the emotions that I had inside of me were being taken out. They were being pushed off, and I could go on with the rest of my life now that I had said these things. Because one very important element of the time in which that video was made, and I think it kind of played into the emotions of the video and just what I said, was the fact that we weren't going to be recording as many calls at the time anymore. Like, we had stopped. I was told, we need to stop this. And so I couldn't have been archiving as much information anymore. That was a deliberate thing that I had to do. And as a way of dealing with that, I recorded a video not just as an explanation to the people who I felt misunderstood my position, but also as a way to let go of those feelings that I was feeling. And as much as I find it interesting to watch people who are archivals of human beings, the extremity with which I did it before is no longer there. I may release a lot of stuff. I may put emphasis on releasing a lot of stuff because ultimately, at my core, that is what I enjoy and that's what I've always enjoyed. But the amount that I did it before, or even thought about doing it before, just isn't there. Like, the type of things that I would be archiving. I'm not seeking to record all these conversations or make note of specific messages that I have messages that I made saved just so I could remember who I was at that time or remember who my friends were at that time. Those things are basically entirely out of memory at this point. Like, it's not something I focus on. So much so that I've actually found an appreciation for the opposite. I've found an appreciation for forgetting things and forgetting who I was at the time that I said certain things. Because I think on some level, some things are just meant to be forgotten. I talked a lot about the conflict between things that you don't want to remember and the things that you do remember, or do want to remember in that video. And I've begun to realize that a lot of the stupid things that I say on the internet can, in a lot of ways, serve to inspire me later on because it's a sign of growth. At the same time, a lot of the stupid things I say on the internet, I don't necessarily want to always see, not for shame or guilt reasons, but just because I feel like it doesn't serve that much of a function. Like, You know, when I go back and I look at absolutely everything I said and I have it on record, I'm like, this could have been horribly condensed. You know, there could have been way more gaps in the time framing. You know, didn't have to have exactly this amount of stuff. And I also think there's just something kind of beautiful about being able to see that all of the stuff that you did within one era of your life, whether it be a month or 2 months or even a year, is kind of beautiful that it can be all just displayed with one 404 message and you don't remember anymore, you know? That entire person you used to be, you don't have to look back on because you don't even really know who they were. Of any evidence that you could have had to even say that you were that person has just been gone, deleted off the internet. It's in the ether now, in a black hole somewhere where no one can find it. And I think there's something really beautiful about that on a emotional level. It's not really a feeling that I got before, and it's not even a feeling that I can necessarily explain. For all of those months that I had to spend thinking about why being an archive was so good, I now have to have even more months, most likely, to explain why being an unarchive is good, you know? It's that conflict between the two feelings because I could explain all of the logical reasons. I mean, with being an archive, explaining the logical reasons for that was pretty hard because it was a very out there stance that not many people held. But with this one, it's easy because everyone holds the stance. That's part of one of the reasons why I don't like having it that much, is because it's not very unique or interesting. At the same time, the degree to which I hold the opinion is very skewed in comparison to other people. I still like archiving lots and lots of shit, but I just don't do it nearly as much as I used to, and I've found an appreciation for not doing it as well. And so trying to understand that feeling, the feeling of being an unarchive is what I really want to understand. I don't want to understand the logical arguments because the logical arguments are boring and stupid. It's what anyone else would have said, you know? I want to understand what the emotion is, the aesthetic, the feeling. And that's something that I really don't know. I just know that there's something kind of beautiful about seeing that 404 message, knowing that the information is just lost to the sands of time. And that's really what I want to understand because anyone could explain, anyone could explain the logic behind something like that because they're stupid normies and they all believe the same thing. But like, if I want to explain what the feeling is, a feeling that's very new to me, that I have not had for most of my life, how do I figure that out? How do I do that? That's really the question. Is that, you know, I go from being a 7 year old who's recording absolutely everything in my house for the sake of archival, you know, taking images of completely mundane things, not just because I enjoyed doing it, because I wanted to remember, now to a guy where I take so few pictures of anything anymore just because I find it all to be insignificant, you know? Or if I do, I'll take a quick film of something because I think it'll look cool for a video. Sure, maybe the intent to archive is in the background, but really it's about looking cool. It's about, you know, trying to have things in the video that add to the video in some way. And um, I, it's really weird to me to kind of accept this new phenomenon within my life and to understand it fully. But it all began with that video because that video was like a passing. It was a swan song. It was the last hurrah of an archiver, me giving up on the ideals that I had held so long for the sake of my friends. That was the circumstances that were surrounding it. And that's why it was recorded and spoken in the way that it was. Um, And I think it's one of my best videos because of that, because it really embodies months upon months of emotions, all just kind of coming out at once when they all had to. But I can't do that anymore. That's the thing, is that I can't embody those emotions because I don't have those same emotions anymore. It's been a long time. It's been a long time since I recorded that, in my view. For a lot of people, 1, 2 years, not that big of a deal for them. For me, it's a ginormous deal. I've gone through, probably 20 or 30 different changes as a human being, large scale changes since then. And so when I look at who I was then, I'm just kind of like, wow, who is that guy? Who even is this? And I think people should constantly be trying to change themselves. It doesn't matter how old you are, as long as you're constantly seeking to improve and be more interesting and more unique, then I think that's a good thing. That's a good sign. But there is a certain element of you that does get lost over time. And I think it's incredibly interesting to go back to videos like that, and I can see who I was, and I can see that I still identify with a lot of the things that I was saying, and that it's still one of my best videos, but not necessarily be able to feel the same emotions I was feeling at the time, or the full breadth of them. And I think stuff like that is really fascinating. And that's part of one of the points that I was getting to in the video that I think makes the video so important, is that I still want to be able to connect with that person who I was, at least tangentially. But the degree to which I want to connect with them is really the important caveat here, where I don't necessarily want to have all of the information at hand, to always be able to kind of walk in on social situations that I was having 3 or 4 years ago. And now it's more about having the general idea of who I was, having a few funny shower thoughts around that I totally forgot by the time I was reading them, but the fact that I did read them provided a little bit of joy and some insight onto who I was and how I've progressed. Those things are very valuable, but this like obsessive need to have everything is, you know, useless. It doesn't serve much of a purpose. And then when you look at, the dichotomy between that catharsis of deleting all those old messages and then seeing it all just kind of go away, and you can say, from the ashes, I've returned anew. The old me is no longer there because I'm now this new being, and I don't have to look back on the old me. That's not something that I have to pay attention to because I don't want to. Instead, I'm just going to focus on the current human being who is Infinite Outlaw. I think things like that are really cool. I think it's a very, very cathartic, well-defined emotion to just let go of everything and then turn out to be a new guy. Sometimes the remnants of your past self you don't always want around. And sometimes the reason why is that letting go of them makes you feel all the more powerful in your new spirit. That's kind of why in the Japanese movies where they have the samurais, they always cut their hair to symbolize a new era in themselves, because cutting their hair has this, cultural connotation to it of like change and rebirth and stuff. And so it's a physical sign of them literally being different, but on a symbolic level, you associate it with the emotions of this change and the story of this change. And one form of cutting the hair off is to just cut all of the accounts off that you used to speak under and run under. I remember when Infinite Outlaw was the archive man, when he was, let's archive everything for the sake of archiving it because I have no life and stuff is cool, I guess. It's really weird to me that as I've gotten older, I've actually come to love the feeling of cutting the hair off, losing the past and forgetting it, only for what becomes new to be all the more exciting, all the more cathartic. Because when you're entirely focused in on that one reality of this is who I am now, not even looking back, just looking forward, then I think it can motivate you to achieve bigger things, or at least motivate you to focus entirely in on the now, to not let the past cloud your judgment, and to, in the present, try and use your own abilities to the best that you can to do whatever it is that you want, or to be whoever it is that you want to be. That's the unarchive, I guess.